Hi everybody, so I'm Lauren Perella. I'm a nurse practitioner. I live here in Lunenburg. I've been here since 2012. I have a 6-year-old daughter in the school district. I'm really here today because I'm excited to be able to share my kind of passion, knowledge on healthy aging. I specialize in adult medicine with really my interest being geriatric specifically. I also have certifications in women's health. That's how I have all these fancy letters after my name. And I'm a wound care, advanced wound care, so I'm a nurse practitioner. So, we're going to talk about healthy lifestyles as we age today. So what is healthy aging? And I found this definition and I loved it, and we'll go through it. So, healthy aging is the process of maintaining good physical, mental, and social health and well-being as we grow older. So I think many people, when we say healthy aging, think about your physical health solely. So how many medical conditions do you have? How many medicines are you on? Have you been in the hospital? Have you been sick? Can you walk? Can you get around? And that is absolutely very important. But there's other aspects of our health that are equally important as we age. So our emotional health, our mental health, our spiritual health, our social health, all those things play an equally important role into our quality of life as we get older. And when we talk about health, we also talk about this idea of well-being. And why I think that's really important is because you may be someone who on paper has 10 health conditions that are all really serious. You may be going to $1 million doctors, you may be sick kind of on paper, but then you may still have a very fulfilling, healthy life in other aspects. So an example I give is one of my patients in my very early years of practice. He was very ill, so he had severe heart failure, he had a defibrillator in place, he had bad coronary disease, diabetes on insulin, he would get wounds all the time, he had lost a leg below the knee. But this man was the most positive individual I have ever met in my life. He would come in, he would laugh, he would joke, he would smile, he saw everything as just a wonderful day to live his life. He made so much value out of the life he had. He would tell me about how he went kind of against medical advice, ride his lawnmower, that he had jerry-rigged to hold him up. He was Santa for the community. He was just kind of a glass half full kind of guy and lived an incredibly fulfilling life, even though he was very ill. On the flip side, you can have no medical conditions, or very few, and kind of on paper look very healthy, but have not a great general well-being sense as you get older. You may be lonely, you may be isolated, maybe you've lost a sense of purpose, and not feel in a very good spot in your life, even if on paper maybe you don't have a lot of medical diagnosis to relate to that. So I think it's important to kind of capture both of those things. So we're going to talk about health kind of in this global perspective, not just your medical diagnoses, although we will talk about some of that too. These are kind of the general categories we're going to talk about in terms of ways to be focusing on trying to live a healthy life as we age. I could spend an hour on every single one of these topics individually, so we're going to kind of do a high-level overview. If people have questions, feel free to ask them. I'm going to try to take most questions at the end, only to kind of keep things going for the recording purposes. But certainly if someone's a burning question, feel free to raise your hand and we'll talk about it on the slide. We can also talk about things after people individually. Also keeping in mind if there's something that you say, I really wish we had talked more about that, I'd love to learn more about that. Hopefully we'll be doing more of these going forward. Deb and I have talked, we'd love to do more presentations on different health topics going forward. So if people have something they want to talk about, whether it's these or anything else, I'm happy to speak about it. So nutrition. There is a lot of information out there on nutrition. You can open any magazine, any website, and find a lot about nutrition. And there's a lot of nuance to it. Kind of the general rule of thumb as we get older, which I tell people is a good nutritional guide kind of across the spectrum, is that we want to be trying to eat a variety of foods each day from these categories, meaning fruits, vegetables, whole grains, protein, dairy. Protein especially being kind of low-fat proteins, so minimizing your red meat intake, focusing more on things like chicken, fish, eggs. You also want to be trying to choose foods that don't have a lot of sugar, saturated fats, or sodium. Really, that means avoiding processed foods as much as possible. So, the old adage about walking the perimeter of the grocery store is what we're really getting to with this. There are, if you are somebody who's kind of very numbers based, there are different recommendations on amounts of those things every day. There's ways you can either track that by manually looking at food labels. There's apps out there. But I find that can get a little overwhelming for people. So I try to keep my nutritional guidance I give my patients pretty basic, which is you want to try to avoid as much as you can of the packaged food and try to eat kind of these more whole foods, fresh foods as best as possible. Calorie intake, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with because, you know, obesity is a major issue and we certainly know that maintaining a healthy weight is important for your health. On the flip side, I do worry. I spend probably more time worrying about my older patients not eating enough, being malnourished, not having access to food. So when we talk about food calories, if you're somebody who doesn't fall into one of those concerns I just mentioned, you have plenty of access to food, you're not having issues with your dental health where you can't eat certain things, you're not losing weight, you're not finding that you're showing any evidence of malnourishment when you speak to your doctor. These are some general calorie guidelines that can help you maintain a healthy weight or lose weight. And they're kind of broken down by your physical activity level and how many calories you should have. So for women, and again, this is 60 and up specifically, if you're really not active at all, you want to be trying to eat around 1,600 calories a day. Moderately active, about 1,800. Very active, 2,000 to 2,200. For men, it's a little bit higher just because their body naturally metabolizes differently and they have more muscle content. And again, those range from 2,000 to about 2,500 calories a day based on your activity level. This slide just kind of shows some simple swaps, again, getting away from those processed foods to kind of fresher whole foods. The other big one down at the bottom here is a move away from solid fats like butters or oils. This all kind of is encompassed by the idea you may hear about the Mediterranean diet. That really is what science in healthcare has shown is the best diet for your health. I'm not talking about specifically for weight loss, I'm talking about for your health, your longevity. So you want to try to move more towards fruits, vegetables, again, lean proteins. The Mediterranean diet does include, like I said, seafood, chicken, and eggs. And getting more towards oils away from solid fats. You'll hear me talk a little bit later, the other diet that really evidence has shown benefit to, especially regarding prevention of Alzheimer's disease, is both the Mediterranean diet as well as what we call the MIND diet, which is really the Mediterranean diet combined with the DASH diet. The DASH diet is kind of the typical high blood pressure diet we talk about, again, minimizing salt in the diet. If you're kind of trying to simplify what you're doing, starting with some simple swaps like this make a big difference. I see a lot of patients eating things on this side that they think are healthy, like granola bars is a big one. People would say, I love my fruit granola bars, and they think they're making a healthy choice. It's really not. It actually has quite a bit of high sugars and fats. Now, if you're making your own homemade granola bars, that's different, but assuming it's kind of something you buy in the store. Same thing with the refined grains, the bagels, the breads, making a switch to something more whole grain. And then with the fats, the one caveat I'll say is, some people ask me about margarine. Margarine is not really a great choice. Although it is low fat, it's a very high processed fat with a lot of artificial chemicals in it. So kind of jury's a bit out on margarine. Studies are seeming to think that it actually is not beneficial for you. So you would be better off cooking with some olive oil than margarine. Drinks are also another kind of tricky place that we get calories, sugar, salt, and we don't always think about. So making simple swaps from going from, for example, a large coffee with milk and sugar to a smaller coffee with either a low-fat milk, preferably no sugar. If you can't do no sugar, as little sugar as possible. Sodas, swapping from a regular soda again to kind of a flavored water, a seltzer is ideal. Same thing with a sweetened tea, going for something unsweetened. You'll see up here I don't have diet sodas listed. Again, there's a lot of mixed evidence, kind of concerning potentially, on the role of diet products. Anything that says diet on it really has artificial sweeteners in them. And there is some thought that those things can cause cancer and such. I tend to tell people, if you absolutely cannot give up soda, swapping to a diet soda is better than regular soda. Swapping to diet juice is better than diet juice. But if you really care about your health and you want to try to do everything you can, getting off those altogether would be to your benefit. Now, having one diet soda a year is not going to be the problem. It's when you're consuming them frequently. The other issue that kind of this slide makes me think of and mention here is caffeine. So caffeine has nothing to do with kind of weight gain and such, but there's a lot of side effects from caffeine as we get older that people don't think about. So I tend to advise my patients, and this is young and old, I'm talking any age, to be having about 8 to 12 ounces of caffeine a day is your maximum. That is not a lot. That's about 1 cup of coffee. And the reason being, so things caffeine does, it can cause significant urinary frequency incontinence, which we see as we get older frequently as a complaint. It can cause palpitation, increased physical symptoms associated with anxiety, which again we see a lot of. It does impact your sleep more than you may realize. So people will say, I'm not sleeping at night. It can't be that cup of coffee I had at noon that was so long ago, but it actually may be affecting your sleep more than you realize. It also raises your blood pressure. So sometimes looking at your caffeine intake can really make a difference in how well you're feeling. We'll talk about caffeine. Physical activity. So again, everyone knows, I think in general, we should be exercising and getting active. But what the evidence really shows is it's important to get all 3 of these categories of physical activity. Focusing on just one of these categories does not have the same health benefit as focusing on getting a little bit from all 3. So I think we tend to think a lot about aerobic activity. That's just kind of culturally, I think, how we've shifted things. And that is important. By aerobic activity, I mean the level of a brisk walk. Okay, so you are not panting for air. It's just enough to get your heart rate up a little bit. And you want to be targeting about 150 minutes per week of that level of activity. It does not have to be 30 minutes a day, for example. It could be one day I go an hour and take a walk, and I do that 3 times a week. It could be I do 10 minutes 3 times a day for 5 days. So it can be split up however you kind of see best for your lifestyle. I will say if you're somebody who engages in high intensity physical activity, so you're a jogger, for example, you really get that heart rate up, you're panting for air, that can go down to 75 minutes a week. So if you're somebody who does high physical activity. Examples of that, and again, walking is kind of the most common one, but a lot of things count for this. So gardening, if you're out gardening and you're walking around your yard and you're moving and grooving, that counts. If you're doing housework, you're vacuuming, you're mopping, that counts. Dancing, swimming, pickleball. I saw here you guys have a tap dancing class, I think, that was great. So all of those things count. The other area that we want to make sure that, especially as we get older, we're focused on is muscle strengthening. And that should be about 2 days per week. Now, most people think of muscle strengthening as lifting weights, doing resistance bands, and those do all count. But there's other ways we can do muscle strengthening too. So that can be things like yoga, or poses like down dog, or planks, things where you're supporting your own body weight, count as muscle strengthening. On the next slide in a few minutes, I'm going to show you some home exercises anyone can do at home as well, so that don't necessarily require weights. Calisthenics are things when we, again, things like holding your leg up for 10 seconds and kind of tightening your muscles also counts. And then balance, about 3 days a week we should be doing some form of balance. That can be Tai Chi, yoga, some basic, again, exercises you can just do on your own at home. You can hold on to either a good sturdy chair or a kitchen counter, stand on one foot, count to 10, do the other side, count to 10, and do that about 10 times on each side. That's an easy one to do at home. You can do, if you're balanced enough, if you don't feel like it's a danger, if you do, please don't do this. You can hold onto a wall, kind of do toe-heel walks, 10 times kind of in each direction. That's another kind of easy one you can do anywhere. Exercises can count as multiple categories. So for example, yoga, you heard me mention in muscle strengthening and balance. So if you do yoga one day, you get both categories. So it's good to kind of find activities that hit multiple of those. On this slide was those kind of home strengthening exercises I talked about. So squats are a great one. And with this one, you see the woman's kind of sitting in a chair, cross your arms, and goes just from sitting to standing. Again, only if you can safely do that. This is that standing leg curl I showed you. He has weights, weighted ankle weights, which are a great tool to have. You can also again do it sitting, just lifting your leg and holding it up with the weighted ankle weight. Especially for somebody who maybe is a little bit more off balance on your feet, that's a really nice exercise to do. Side leg raise, again, same thing. You're going to hold on to kitchen counter or a sturdy chair, lifting your leg up to the side. You can do it without weights, or if you feel like that's too easy, adding the leg weights. Basic bicep presses and overhead presses. If you have a small set of weights, 2 to 5 pounds, you can use them. I've also had people just use cans of soup, and that works out well for them, so kind of using what you have. Same thing here with the seated row. And then the toasting, again, is using a chair or a counter. So all kind of, point is here, you can do these things at home. You don't necessarily have to go to a gym to do this. Again, I saw you guys have some great classes here, though, too. If you're not sure what to do or you're not sure how to safely do it, I always recommend going to either a class or a personal trainer or even a physical therapist, kind of for the first couple sessions at least, to get an idea of what is in your realm to safely do, because everyone has different abilities physically. Emotional care. So this one is very, very common in all ages. But as we get older, sometimes people who maybe earlier in their life felt very healthy from an emotional perspective suddenly are having emotional concerns that maybe they are new to them. It's very common as we get older to have, loss of friends, loss of loved ones, changes in our kind of day-to-day life. Suddenly we're not working anymore, we're retired, maybe our schedule's off, our purpose is different. We might not see our family as much as they've grown, the kids have grown and gone off. Our own health conditions can get overwhelming and scary, and these are all very common feelings as we get older, and sometimes those are harder for some people to cope with than others, or sometimes we go through periods where it's just very overwhelming and then it kind of improves naturally on its own. So recognizing first off that this is an important issue to focus on and taking care of yourself, but also if you need to, asking for help if it's getting to be too overwhelming. That's really critically important. So some kind of general self-help things that I think everyone should do for our emotional health, even if you feel wonderful, these are good things to do, is making sure you're getting that regular exercises. Studies show, regardless of the age, 30 minutes a day does help with our general mental and emotional health. Eating healthy, regular meals and hydration. This is really key. Again, put aside the nutritional component of it. We know when you're not feeling well emotionally, you often tend to just kind of skip the eating. I don't want to make something. I don't feel like cooking. What's that purpose of it? And then you just skip the meal or you skip drinking, and now you've added fuel to the fire where suddenly, you already weren't feeling great emotionally. Now you're adding to that kind of with this physical deprivation. So making sure you're doing sleep is really critical, and it's, as mentioned before we started, it's probably the number one complaint I get from people of all ages is sleep. People are not sleeping enough. People are not getting high enough quality sleep. There can be a lot of causes for that, and I kind of tell everybody the same spiel. First thing you want to do with sleep is you want to go to bed around the same time every night. You want to wake up around the same time every day. So that means, I'm not saying you set an alarm, but in general saying, I go to bed around 10, I wake up around 6, or some version of that is helpful. You want to be shooting for about 7 hours. That is commonly not accomplished, but that should be what we're shooting for. Making sure, and a lot of these people are hard to ask for people, but trying to keep your bed for sleep. What I mean by that is not being in your bed, watching TV, eating, hanging out during the day. Your brain gets very confused when you do that, and then you suddenly try to say, okay, it's sleep time, but we've been in this bed all afternoon, sort of thing. So keeping the bed preferably for sleep. You want to try to, again, avoid the caffeine like we talked about. I tell people eating or drinking really anything 2 hours before bed is not advised, short of taking a sip of water for your medications or something. Because again, that fills our stomach, makes us feel bloated, can contribute to heartburn, acid reflux. Even if you don't realize that's what you're having, it may be happening. Make sure you urinate all night. All those things kind of keep you up. Lights, we are very sensitive to lights, especially electronic device lights. We are not meant naturally to have this blue light with us all the time. So if you can, keep the cell phone out of the bedroom, keep the computer out of the bedroom. I'm a proponent for no TVs in the bedroom. I don't have one in my bedroom. I know people tend to have one, but if you're really having trouble sleeping, sometimes getting rid of the TV in the bedroom makes a big difference. Some people may have a sleep disorder. Sleep apnea is very common. So if you're somebody who's kind of doing all these interventions and finding, you know what, I'm still having trouble sleeping, especially waking up in the middle of the night, it could be sleep apnea. So when we think about sleep apnea, we often see you're falling asleep okay, but you're waking up and you don't really know why you're waking up frequently throughout the night. And I tell people what happens in that scenario is your oxygen level has dropped and your body is waking you up for survival purposes. It's saying, wake up, I'm hypoxic, I can't breathe, and it's waking you up, and you don't realize that that's why it's waking you up, but it really is a survival mechanism that your body's doing. So if that seems to be a persistent issue, that might be what's going on, and it might be worth talking to your doctor. And most people kind of scoff at the idea of wearing a sleep apnea mask, but many people, once they wear one and are sleeping better, never will give it up because it makes such a difference. Relaxing activities that you enjoy. So I emphasize you here because everybody has different activities that they find fulfilling and relaxing. So for example, myself, I might be someone who says, I love to be around people, I love to be busy, I like to volunteer, I like to work part-time, I like to go to the senior center, I like to do all these things. Someone else may say, I find that very overwhelming. I prefer to read and be in nature, or meet with one or two friends and have a coffee. That's relaxing to me. So just being mindful of finding something you like, finding your group of people or peers or family that kind of matches your interests. And don't be afraid to try something different. If you try something and say, I did not enjoy that, it's okay to say, well, those people like that, but I don't. I'm going to try something else. Don't just kind of isolate and back into your house at that point and say, oh, I went once and I hated that, so I'm going to find something. Setting goals and priorities. This is especially for people who maybe get overwhelmed with the lists of to-do. And especially, as we get older and sometimes our health declines and we have all these doctor's appointments and we have to eat right and we have to exercise and we have to go to this doctor and that doctor and we got to take this medicine. It can get overwhelming. So making kind of a list of these are the things I have to do this week. Today I'm just going to start with number 1 or 2, and tomorrow I'll kind of conquer the next ones. Can be helpful for some people. In that note too, I've heard me mention the word purpose. I also like to think that, if you're somebody who is finding kind of this sense of, I don't know, what to do with myself at this point in my life. I used to work, I used to be really busy, I used to raise the kids, I used to do XYZ, and now that void is there. Sometimes focusing on trying to find a new priority and a new purpose can be the solution to your entire health as you get older. So being creative right now. Gratitude and positivity, that kind of goes back to the example I gave of my lovely patient earlier in the conversation. You can be incredibly, despite having a lot of medical issues or losses in your life, trying your best to focus on the positives and trying to focus on what you do have, and finding goodness in your life is important. Writing that down if you need to, sticking it on the fridge. So if you're having a bad day, looking at it and saying, oh yeah, these are the things that I want to be thankful for, it actually can help. Staying connected. We're going to talk next about social health, but studies show consistently those of us who live in areas where we're engaging in some sort of social environment really live longer and live better quality lives. So they've looked at those who live the longest, best lives across the whole world, and one of the common themes is some sort of social involvement, and that could be something like senior centers. In California, there's a big group of elders who have kind of found this community where they do all sorts of activities together within that. It could be with your family, so there's other cultures where adults as they age live with their family in multi-generational living situations, and that's been shown to be really helpful. It can be working, it can be volunteering, it can be a church. There's all sorts of different ways that social network can look, but having some sort of social network. And then like I said, if you're finding symptoms that are persistent of feeling down, feeling sad, crying, lack of interest. Sometimes you're not crying or feeling sad, but you're just kind of blah, you're not interested in doing anything, you just kind of want to stay home and do nothing. If you're worrying all the time, if you're really fearful, not sleeping at night, up all night worrying and thinking about things, those can be symptoms of more, mental health diagnoses like depression, like anxiety, that you may want to talk to your doctor about. There are things that we can do medication-wise, there are things we can do counseling and therapy-wise that are totally okay to be reaching out for. And that doesn't mean you need those forever. Sometimes it's just kind of a short-term thing where we're going to do different action. Please make sure you're saying something. So social well-being, like I said, really critical. The fact you guys are all here engaged with the Adult Activity Center shows you know the importance of that. But we know consistently that having a social community, like I said, doesn't just make you feel good, but it actually makes you live longer and makes you live healthier lives. And that can look differently. This is a video from the National Institute on Aging that I thought was just nice.
It's social isolation. Feeling lonely and being isolated are bad for your health. Loneliness and social isolation are associated with higher rates of depression, heart disease, and more. The good news is that you can help prevent and reduce the impact of social isolation and loneliness. However, it's important to know if you're at risk. Try to stay active and better connected if you live alone or can't leave your home. Feel alone or disconnected from others. Recently had a major loss or change, are a caregiver, or lack a sense of purpose. Here are some ideas for staying connected. Find an activity that you enjoy or learn something new. You might have fun and meet people with similar interests. Get moving. Exercise decreases stress, boosts your mood, and can increase your energy. Volunteer. You'll feel better by helping others. Stay in touch with family, friends, and neighbors in person, online, or by phone. And consider adopting a pet. Animals can be a source of comfort and may also lower stress and blood pressure. For more information about preventing loneliness and social isolation,
so with that, with the social health, main thing with that video is not just showing the importance of it, but I wanted people to know it can look different again for everybody. So, even if it's engaging online with people, safely, I always say, but some people, do video chats with their family who live across the country. That's wonderful. If you're in some sort of a group, virtually or in person, that helps. Pets are a wonderful source of rolling eyes. For some people, again, everyone's is different. For some people, find pets become their main purpose. I've had patients where pets are their number one purpose in life for going on is taking care of their pet.
Well, that's what I thought too. Well, my husband has dementia, and him and the dog, I thought would be great for him.
Yeah.
Don't get along. It's a dog from hell.
Yeah, and sometimes, to that point, sometimes pets can be too much as we get older, and it can be a burden. So, again, for each their own. I've had people even just like a guinea pig, a little hamster, it gives so much purpose to their life. I'm not a guinea pig or hamster fan, but I had one woman, that was her thing. She loved taking care of that guinea pig. I swear that it kept her, no family, she didn't have anybody kind of like that, but that guinea pig was. This is probably my favorite topic to talk about, and it's because I think it's probably the most overlooked topic that we don't talk about enough. So injury prevention. And I say this because people, you can be living your best life, so healthy, have no medical conditions or very few, you're exercising, you're happy, you're loving life, things are going great. One bad fall destroys that all. And this happens all the time. It's not uncommon. Another example I always think of, I had my neighbor's best friend. She had just retired, and a couple months prior, she was only like 65, 66 years old. Fell down her stairs and died. Did not get to enjoy her retirement. Hit her head, and did not enjoy her retirement, and it was devastating. and that does not happen frequently. Some kind of statistics I hear about, and these are all, again, up-to-date statistics. 25% of Americans age 65 and older fall every year. So there are 4 of us here, so statistically, 1 of you will fall this year. That's awful, but it's the case. Every 11 seconds, an older adult is treated in the emergency room for a fall. Every 19 minutes, an older adult dies from a fall. And 95% of hip fractures are caused by falls, and of hip fractures, 20% of those patients who get one die within 1 year. So they're very devastating, not only lethally, but they significantly impact our quality of life as we get older again. You might not be able to move the same you did. Assuming you survive, you may not be able to speak the same or think the same if you hit your head and you have a head injury. You may have chronic pain all of a sudden that can drastically affect your quality of life. You may not be able to live in the same location you've lived at, or you may require significant modifications to your home and your day-to-day life. So fall prevention really is critical. Things, again, I could spend 3 hours talking about fall prevention, but kind of basic things that I tell everyone you should think about. Wearing good footwear, good sneakers with good grip. My mother is one who wears flip-flops all the time at 68 years old, and I'm constantly fighting with her. So please wear good footwear. Making sure that you don't have throw rugs down, items keeping your pathways clear in your home. Please avoid furniture walking. It makes me cringe when I see people doing that. If you need an assistive device outside the home, you need it inside the home too. So using your assistive devices. And if you think, again, I'm having trouble on my feet, but I don't know what assistive device kind of is best for me, please speak with a professional, whether it be a physical therapist or a doctor, about kind of looking at a device for you. There's various different devices for different purposes. Don't just go, pick up a cane because you think that's the right thing for you and start using it. There is proper technique and proper devices for each person.
What is ERS?
Yeah, so ERS is Emergency Response System. So this is, another thing that is very important to me. So especially if you live by yourself, but really for all others, but especially if you live by yourself, having an ERS, which is the button that you can either press on your watch, press on your, they have a necklace one. They do have some, especially for individuals with dementia, that will alert if they fall. They don't have to press the button because some people cognitively don't know how to press it, exactly. And this is another one where if you fall and you're by yourself and you can't get up, being down on the ground for a couple of days happens all the time, and it is devastating. Not only are you suffering and in pain and you're on the ground scared, but the likelihood that you're going to survive as days go on decreases, and you're going to start having not just a fall with a broken bone, but you start going into kidney failure and dehydration, and suddenly the medical issues are rocking up, you may be bleeding. So making sure that if you do fall, there's a way for someone to come and get you as soon as possible is critical. People often will tell me, well, I have my cell phone. Unless you know you are carrying that cell phone with you every minute of the day in the house, I recommend an ERS. Because if your cell phone gets left in your purse over there on the counter, on the table, again, if you are down, you can't necessarily drag yourself there to get it, or it's going to cause more damage even if you do so. If you have a way of really carrying your cell phone everywhere, that may be an acceptable alternative, but really an ERS is a good option. They even do make fancier ones that have GPS to them. Again, for those especially who may have dementia and may be worried about wandering, it's a whole other conversation on dementia specifically, but they do make ones with GPS navigation to them as well. So most ERSs mainly work in your home, but there are some that if you leave the home and have a fall, they'll find you using the GPS navigation. Safe driving, always a sensitive topic, driving as we get older. What I mean here is being aware of your own limitations. So if you say, I really can't see well at night, please don't drive at night. If you say, I really can't see well when it rains, please don't drive when it rains. If you wear glasses and hearing aids, please wear them when you're driving, because that is hugely critical. If you are finding driving is getting very challenging, or you're having small fender benders or things like that, please don't be afraid to speak to your family or your doctor about it. First of all, there are ways we can assess in the medical community you're driving without sending you to the DMV. There are occupational health programs that will test your driving independently of the DMV. So if it's something that you're really concerned about, you want to be safe, and you don't necessarily want to go turn your license in, there are programs like that we can refer people to. And sometimes people aren't safe to drive anymore, and that's a conversation to have. Nobody likes giving that independence up. That's a major issue as well. But the last thing you need is to have a major car accident and hurt yourself, or God forbid, hurt somebody else.
Yeah, so tomorrow I'm going to a driver's safety course
There you
for
go.
older people.
Okay, good, yeah.
And I get a discount on my insurance.
Nice, good.
Wow.
Who's offering that?
This is the Groton Seniors.
Okay, yeah.
And it's from 9:30 to like 2:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's long.
There's a lot.
Then we drive to Florida. I'm trying to help my husband be a more defensive driver. So,
reaction times change as we get older too. So,
big party tomorrow.
Another big thing that kind of comes into play with both driving and falls, and we're going to talk a bit about with the cognition more too, is medications. A lot of medications affect our cognitive abilities, reaction times, and can impair us and make us more likely to fall or not be driving safely. We as healthcare providers own a lot of this. I will tell you as one, we're very busy, we get through short visits, and it's very easy to focus on adding meds and not always taking away meds. So don't be afraid to kind of say to your doctor, hey, can we take a moment and look at my medication list and talk about, are these things affecting me at all negatively in terms of my cognition or my fall risk? Sometimes things you've been on for 20 years that you may think, I've been on that since I was 50 years old, there's no way that's a problem, affect you differently as you get older versus when you were younger. They're metabolized differently, they have different risks. So sometimes we do want to look at medications. Over-the-counter meds also have a lot of risks to them, especially things with what's called diphenhydramine, which is the generic of Benadryl, which is in a lot. So if you take anything over-the-counter that's for sleep, I can almost guarantee you it has this in it. And that is one of the most common culprits of really negatively impacting your cognition, increasing your fall risk. It can cause you to be constipated, it can cause urinary retention. There's a lot of downsides to generic Benadryl in that class of meds, and it's very available. So talking about your over-the-counter meds with your doctor, who may not know what you're taking over-the-counter, it is very reasonable. And then we talked about that. I think just a good healthcare routine. So, a lot of this stuff is things you can be doing independently on your own. It is important, though, still, to go for your regular checkups. Like I said, to talk about things like your medication lists and some of these concerns we talked about, because there can be things we can be doing as healthcare providers in conjunction with you. Vaccines are incredibly important for keeping people healthy as they get older. People have mixed opinions on this, but in general, science proves that regular vaccines, especially your flu, your pneumonia, your RSV vaccines, certainly prevent hospitalizations and deaths related to these illnesses, especially as you get older. There's other vaccines as well out there that prevent different illnesses, including shingles and hepatitis and all of that. But especially your flu, RSV, and pneumonia vaccines, I would encourage people to talk to their healthcare provider if they haven't had them, if they're up to date. The schedules can be confusing for some of them, especially the pneumonia vaccines. So if you have questions, please ask. Screenings. Again, you can be living a wonderful life and get something like colon cancer, breast cancer, and have kind of things be turned around. So I really encourage people to try to stay up to date with their screenings, which includes, mammograms, colonoscopies, bone density scans. Back to our fall conversation we had. You may have osteoporosis and not know it until you have a fall and you break your bone. But there are things, if we can catch osteoporosis early, that we can prescribe and do to help kind of improve your bone health and prevent injury even if you do fall. And the prevention, looking at your medications is not just taking your medications faithfully and what you need for overall health, but de-prescribing it too. Cognitive health. So, second most common concern I get, other than sleep, is memory. And sometimes it's people legitimately having memory loss, and sometimes it's people just having normal aging, but being concerned about it. So I want to make it clear that everybody has some level of cognitive decline as we get older. The brain, just like any other muscle in our body, ages. And it's not just your memory when I talk about your cognition, it's all the functions of your brain. So your brain controls your balance, your brain controls all the sensations of your body, so how you feel things, how you taste things, how you hear things, how you see things. So you may have a great memory, but start seeing changes in your cognition in these other realms. Our processing speed changes, so we may, doing a math problem may take us a little longer than it did 20 years ago. Again, that doesn't mean your memory's bad, but you may start to see your cognition changing in these other realms. So what do we know can help support cognitive health, which includes memory, but other elements as well? So limiting alcohol, this is another kind of controversial one that comes up a lot. There is some evidence that 1 glass of red wine a day may have general health benefits. 1 4-ounce glass of wine, okay? There is no evidence that 1 beer, 1 shot should do anything with that, even a glass of white wine. Red wine, there may be some benefit to, and there's absolutely no evidence that more than 1 glass of red wine a day does anything for your health, and it probably is bad for your health. So limiting alcohol. And I will also say there are no studies that I'm aware of that show avoidance of alcohol is bad for your health. So if you just choose to avoid alcohol, it's not like you're doing anything bad to your health. Smoking, really should be 0. Chewing tobacco as well. Illicit substances are going to impact your cognition as well. And that includes marijuana, which is legal in this state, but it does, again, impair your cognition. Vision and hearing loss. This is actually a big one. We know that simply correcting people's vision and hearing loss can drastically improve their cognitive health and their memory. So someone who's really struggling cognitively, simply getting them a pair of glasses and hearing aid if they need it may make a night and day difference. I'm not saying it's going to reverse Alzheimer's disease, but if you're seeing someone who suddenly is having confusion and they've kind of ruled everything else out, fixing that might be helpful. Managing your chronic medical conditions, especially your vascular conditions, is really crucial to protecting your brain. So when I say vascular conditions, what I mean is our body is filled with blood vessels, and there are different risk factors like high blood pressure, diabetes, smoking, high cholesterol, that cause plaque buildup in our arteries throughout our body, including our brain. So we often think about high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes when we talk about your heart, and we talk about people having blockages in their heart or heart attacks, but those things also drastically impact the health of your brain. And sometimes it's something that happened in the form of a severe event like a stroke, but it also causes just decreased perfusion to the brain, not at a level of a stroke, also from these vascular conditions, is gradually causes brain damage and can cause specifically vascular dementia, which is a form of dementia. So if you have high blood pressure, if you have high cholesterol, if you have diabetes, aggressively managing those with your doctor is important. Again, there is a point where we kind of sometimes cut back on aggressively managing those, often in our 90s. But if you're in your 60s, 70s, even in your 80s and are pretty relatively healthy, you really should be trying to aggressively keep these things at goal. Meaning, a blood pressure below 130 over 80, a high cholesterol, your LDL, which is your bad cholesterol, really below 100, diabetes with an A1C goal certainly below 7, some even less than that for some people. On the flip side, we don't want too low blood sugar, we don't want too low blood pressure, so we always kind of are looking at that, especially as we get older. But don't be afraid if you think, that those things could be tighter controlled, to have conversations again with your doctor about how can we make sure that we're controlling these risk factors so that I hopefully don't have either a catastrophic event like a stroke down the road, but also, like I said, smaller changes that over long periods of time may creep up on you. You don't want to suddenly 10 years from now be developing dementia symptoms because your vascular health is maybe not as optimally controlled. Medications, like I already touched upon, really drastically affecting your cognitive health. So make sure to review those regularly and don't take things without talking to your doctor. Sleep, like we talked about. Avoiding head injuries, like we talked about with the falls. One bad head injury can be never the same again. That Mediterranean and that mind diet that I mentioned, both have been shown to decrease the risk of Alzheimer's disease specifically. So trying to follow those diets can help prevent you from developing Alzheimer's specifically. And then both physical activity and social engagement have been shown specifically for cognitive health to help improve your outcomes. And this is just what we all want to be living, is happy, enjoying life, happy to open. People have questions.
I saw something online about the mind diet.
Yeah.
I was looking at cookbooks for it, but it's funny, I went to Barnes and Noble and there was not one that I could find.
It's a less commonly known diet for sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, it really is Mediterranean and DASH. So if you can find cookbooks of either of those, it's pretty much the equivalent. There may be some, I'll have to look and see if I can find any like Amazon or something. But it's kind of a researched. It's done more in clinical research. To your point, I haven't seen it talked about as much kind of in the general public when people are making that type of consumer product. But you could, I'm sure there's diet books or cookbooks on the Mediterranean diet or DASH, which you could kind of combine. Yeah.
I want to put a plug in for that. There's an exercise class over at the library, and they do the strengthening and the balance together, and it's a free.
Yep.
And it's a great class.
That's wonderful.
And I have to say, and I can't even believe it did this, it increased my bone density.
Absolutely. Weight-bearing exercise, weights especially, or any sort of body weight exercises do increase your bone density.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it when my doctor said, well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. It increased your bone density. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
But it's a good class. It's every Tuesday.
Oh, I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, Nikki Holtz. Nikki, she does it.
Okay, good.
And she's a physical therapist.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that.
So you say blood pressure should be under 130 versus 120 for an older person.
Right. So exactly. So if we do have tighter control for sure for people who are under 65, meaning ideally 120.
Yeah.
It's not wrong to shoot for 120s as a person over 65. You just have to be cautious of hypoperfusion too. What I mean by that is if your blood pressure is running too low, you're also not getting enough blood pumping. Yeah. So if you're somebody who really is monitoring your blood pressure faithfully and it looks like it's staying in that 110, 120 range, that is fine to be at. I think our concern as healthcare providers is if you only check your blood pressure once every 6 months in the office and we're getting 120 over 60 and it might be a little higher because you're nervous there, what are you running at kind of at home? And that's why I say conversations are helpful. There's nothing wrong with being in the 120s even in your 60s. I would worry more about someone running under 110 systemically. It would probably start consistently. Would make me a little bit worried about are they getting too low? And certainly over 80, definitely I would gear more towards the 130s. Somebody over 80 as well.
So RSV, do we need more than one?
No, right now it's one. This is a relatively new vaccine. It's only been out a couple of years. So the current recommendations are one in your life. Now, we don't really know how long the immunity lasts from the RSV vaccine. So I always tell people it's not impossible that in a few years from now studies show it weans and we're recommending another one. But as of now, it's one. Flu and COVID, recommended annually for everybody over 65 as well. Pneumonia is a little bit complicated depending on what you've had, and there's different pneumonia vaccines, and that's one that we have tools as healthcare providers. They're probably available on the internet too, where we can kind of plug in what you've had and when you've had it and determine if you're due for another one or not. There is evidence, though, that even for those who are up to date on their pneumonia vaccine, if it's been more than 5 years since your last one, the immunity does wane. And so it may be worth getting another one if it's been more than 5 years, even if you're up to date.
And so which one would you get? Like I always get confused with pneumonia. So what is the newest one?
So the newest one is the pneumonia 20 and the pneumonia 21. And if you've never had a pneumonia vaccine in your life, if you get one of those, you're done. That really covers everything.
Okay.
If you've had If you've already had, though, the older vaccines, which were the 13 and the 23,
Yeah.
and you had the 23 after you were 65, yeah, and it's complicated, then you're up to date.
Let me write
So
that
you
down
reach
again.
out to the healthcare provider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually, I have an app on my phone where like I put in on these tricky cases, like someone's exact profile, meaning your age, when you got which vaccine and when, and it's through the CDC, and it will tell me this is the exact shot that someone wants. So your doctor can do that pretty easily too for you as an individual.
Okay.
But in general,
So you should at least have
the 20 or the 21, if
21.
you know, are the newest ones, those kind of cover everything. The other thing is you want to make sure you had a pneumonia shot at 65 or older. If all your pneumonia vaccines were done before 65, you are going to need another one at some point. It might not be today. It might sometimes, again, we recommend waiting a period of time, but